This election is not about whether we're giving the ANC another chance. This election is about who's going to replace the ANC's government. We've had 30 years of ANC government and we've had 30 years of misery under the ANC, and we need to get rid of the ANC in this election. And just, Floyd says that we are obsessed with the EFF. Not at all. Not at all are we obsessed with the EFF, because the EFF is probably going to be the biggest loser in this election.
So the polls seem to be revealing that the ANC might lose its majority for the first time in 30 years. Let's listen to what Fred Nel of the DA party had to predict, and then I'll be back for some analysis on ground on the results of the ongoing election count.
Fred Nel from the Democratic Alliance, we'll start from there. With regards to your door-to-door campaigns, what have you seen? What have you experienced? Do you find a nation that is receptive and responsive, or despondent and angry?
Well, when we canvass the voters, they're very positive towards us. And I think that they are looking for change, and they're looking for total change at this stage. And but in terms of the circumstances, it's dire. We have a higher unemployment rate than we had 5 years ago when we at the same juncture. People are desperate. They need jobs. They want safe communities rife with crime. They can't walk in the streets anymore at night, and they want to see that the corrupt are being jailed, and that's not being done at the moment. So what we find is that our message of change is being received extremely well by voters, and that they are looking for hope. And this is what we find. But as I said, their personal circumstances are dire.
Mr. Nel, let's flesh it out a bit. And people are wondering how their coalitions would work if we had to get to that stage. And they've seen examples at local government level, and many are put off. You said, your party has said that you want to do away with so-called cadre deployment. So practically, in practical terms, if the DA had to come into power in a coalition government, would you perhaps look at appointing an ANC minister for continuity? Doing away with so-called cadre deployment. How would you practically implement that?
Well, this election is not about whether we're giving the ANC another chance. This election is about who's going to replace the ANC's government. And the most realistic path to that is through a multi-party coalition. And that's why we started and initiated the process of engaging with other potential partners in the multi-party charter, because we believe that if you flesh these things out before an election and you have agreements about certain key aspects before an election, then you can easily form a coalition, and that coalition will function. And we are not interested in putting the ANC back into power, and I just want to make that very clear. That's why we are part of the multi-party charter, and that's why the ANC is not part of the multi-party charter, because we've had 30 years of ANC government and we've had 30 years of misery under the ANC, and we need to get rid of the ANC in this election. And this election is about offering a viable alternative to the ANC to make sure that we can replace him as a government. And just, Floyd says that we are obsessed with the EFF. Not at all. Not at all are we obsessed with the EFF, because the EFF is probably going to be the biggest loser in this election. So we are definitely not giving any attention to them. Our focus is to get rid of the ANC in this election, and that is the choice that voters have. They can go to a coalition with the EFF, the ANC, MK and PA in one side, or they can go to a DA-led coalition on the other side. Anything in between is irrelevant, because they haven't pegged where they're going to stand either for the DA or for the ANC. So those are your two choices in this election.
Before you let that mic go, Mr. Nel, is there a possibility of a coalition between the DA and the ANC?
No, not at this stage, because in our agreement in the multi-party charter, we said that we do not want to engage with the ANC in any form of coalition. And if we want to break up the multi-party coalition, let me tell you, you got to bring in the ANC. And that's not going to happen. The objective in this election is to get rid of the ANC. And we cannot consider going into any coalitions with the ANC at this stage, because it just doesn't make sense if you're trying to undo 30 years of ANC corruption and then bring them back into government. You're just going to have more of the same.
And so what do you guys think? Really, really interesting. I think he had to. He actually spoke about this whole multi-party charter. Although I remember one video, Neil De Beer spoke about how the multi-party charter thing, the UIM is a part of the multi-charter, but he really doesn't really go, with the ideology of the multi-party charter. In the sense that the multi-party charter really wants to get the ANC out of power, but in terms of many other things, the UIM doesn't agree. So the multi-party charter seems to be fractured in that regard, in that every party has its own ideology, but the collective goal, objective, is to just kick the ANC out of power. And it's, in a way, it seems like it's really working, because according to analysts so far, the current analysis going on as the election vote count is being done at the moment. I'll just get some analysis here as it's been reported, even from some media sources. Here now, the CNN actually had a really comprehensive report on what's going on ground there. So it speaks about how that, early results from the South African election suggest that the ruling ANC African National Congress Party could lose its majority for the first time in 30 years. And that with results coming in from 22% of polling stations at 4 p.m. On the 30th of May, support for the ANC stood at 43.5%. And the official opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, had 24.7% of the vote, while the far-left economic EFF, a splinter party of the ANC, had 8.9%. So the EFF has dropped from the 10%, which it had actually maintained for a while, up now to 8.9%. And this is based on results from 22% of the polls as at 4 p.m., okay? Yesterday, the 30th of May. The EFF had 8.9%, and this is data from from South Africa's Election Commission, all right? Now, the respected research group CSIR has actually modeled the ANC winning less than 45% of the national polls as of mid-morning on Thursday. And officials also from the IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission, have stressed that the official tally could actually take several days, and some large voting wards could take some time to be tallied. So we are still watching, we'll still be counting, and we'll still be analyzing, making analysis, all right? Now, it also says that in past elections, results from rural areas where the ANC has major strongholds have come in later, boosting the results for the party. So even though these are early counts, usually results from the rural areas, actually come in much later, and that's where the ANC usually skyrockets. The ANC votes usually skyrocket. So that has been a trajectory, and it's actually saying that. But once all the votes are counted, if the ANC remains below 50%, it will be forced to enter a coalition with one of these parties which Fred Nel speaks about here. And yeah, the interesting part of this whole thing is that both Herman Mashaba of the Action SA, the DA, and most of them really do not want to go into a coalition with the ANC and the EFF. And so it's really difficult how the whole play would be in trying to form a government if the ANC is unable to get a majority. It will really be a really tough one. But regardless, depending on how low the ANC support dips low, it may need to form a government, a deal with one of the larger opposition parties, such as the DA or the EFF, to remain in power. The EFF also has actually said it's not interested in a coalition with the ANC. So it's really, really interesting. It's going to be a really interesting take how the government will be formed after this whole election, after how a coalition will be formed after this whole period. Now, this research also speaks about the Umkhonto weSizwe, the MK party led by Jacob Zuma at the time. So it appears here that Jacob Zuma appears to be on course. It actually says that Jacob Zuma appears to So the research further goes on to speak about the Umkhonto Wesizwe led by Jacob Zuma, you see. So it speaks about how Jacob Zuma appears to be on course to do well in KwaZulu-Natal. And that KwaZulu-Natal is the eastern coastal province where Durban is located, okay? And as at 10 a.m. on the 30th of May, local time, the MK party had 42.3% of the votes in KwaZulu-Natal compared to 20% of the ANC in KZN. Really interesting. And Zuma, who's a fierce critic of the ANC leader and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, he was forced to resign as leader in 2018. We know that the ANC, it was kind of like a premature end of his regime. And he served a brief stint in jail in 2021 for contempt of court. But now the 82-year-old was barred from running the president actually last week after the country's constitutional court ruled that 5 years must have elapsed since the completion of his sentence before he can run for any political office or something. However, his face remained on the ballot, and a lot of people are asking a lot of questions like why? How did this whole thing play? And how is it that he maneuvered? But anyway, Jacob Zuma always speaks about how that he's a freedom fighter. He's going to fight the constitutional courts in South Africa. He's going to fight the rule that whatever it is, the ruling in South Africa actually is not democracy, and that is not freedom. And he's a fighter for freedom and democracy and that. So probably, I don't know how he was able to maneuver these whole debates at the court, and his face is actually on the ballot as we speak. Now, it also says that South Africa's Electoral Commission has actually 7 days to declare the final result, and I think that's going to be around the first weeks of June. However, they usually announce results sooner than that, and that this year the Commission has set Sunday, June the 2nd, as the final results day, 2nd of June. So we'll be doing a lot of analysis before then. Now, the analysis concludes that if the ANC loses its majority, it will have 14 days once the final results are declared to form a new government before a new parliament must convene to elect the nation's president. And so it's really interesting times. These are really interesting times. South Africa is really on a trajectory that is totally different and complete ever since the inception of the ANC government in 1994. And it might be that, we don't know, but it might be that this might be the first time the ANC loses its majority. It's going to be a really kind of like big shock, in the political trajectory of the country. We might be getting into coalition governments, and that sets up a new history of the nation and the new history of the tone of the political climate at the time. And what that spells for South Africa is really interesting. We will keep on analyzing and studying here on Kwazemi. But what do you guys think about this? Share your thoughts. Let's communicate. Let's really break down these things in the comments.